I want to spend this afternoon talking with you about something which is quite fundamental to who we are as sensing, thinking, and creative people, and that's images. Images matter, but why do they matter? And why do we produce images? First, I want to ask a question of the audience, and I'm glad I can see all of you. How many of you in the past year have visited a museum? Go ahead, raise your hand. Look around. That's a significant number. That's almost all of you. And it's a good thing. But I must admit that even as an archaeologist, I'm kind of surprised by this. Because after all, we live in a world of advanced digital technology, where any of us with a Wi-Fi signal and some free time can become a connoisseur, where we can access millions of images with the click of a button, where we can access endless amounts of information, where we can tour any of the museums from Tokyo, Rio, New York to Vienna in near real time, thanks to platforms like Google's Museum Project. And yet, while cultural production has continued to move online, while visitation to concert halls and theaters like this one is dwindling, visitation to museums is up by as much as 50% in the last 10 years in places like the United States. Since the first museums were founded in Europe 200 years ago, Berlin's Altes Museum, the British Museum, the Louvre, we have continued to flock to these secular temples of analog experience to stand in front of works of art in a way that looks less and less like this and more like this. This is the Louvre 200 years later, same place. And so I have to ask myself, what, why, how has the traditional art viewing experience managed to compete successfully for increasingly precious time and attention? And what is going on here? And what is going on here, but most importantly here, when we stand in front of something created 20 or 200 or 2,000 years ago? The answer for me might be found in one single work of art. So I invite you to consider this painting, created by Paul Gauguin at the end of the 19th century. Gauguin was living, more accurately dying, from several sexually transmitted diseases on a remote Polynesian island. He was broke, he had little to no career prospects, and he faced the end of his life by creating this masterpiece. And tellingly, in the upper left-hand corner of the painting, we find this, translated from the French. It reads, "Where do we come from? What are we? And where are we going?" And today, every year, 1.2 million people stand in front of this painting, pondering this question. And for me, that gets to the heart of the matter of why images matter. Because they seek and successfully answer these three fundamental questions of humanity. Where do I come from? Who am I? And where am I going? Today, these answers can be found in paintings like Gauguin's, or they can be found in very mundane objects, a Greek urn, a 16th century map, a personal letter maybe, even Edward Snowden's laptop, which is now on view at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Images are traces of what we have been, who, where, what we have been. And it's my argument that museums are far from storehouses of the past. They are not graveyards of dead artists or dead art. They are living, breathing, active records of us in the most universal, global, and cosmopolitan sense of the word. To wander and to wonder in a museum is to spark that very specific enlightened curiosity about our world. It's like travel. We can move the familiar and the foreign into the same space. We can place ourselves on a continuum of a shared human identity and history. We can see ourselves in another, a view that is so critically needed in today's world. So why do museums matter? And why do images matter? Because they dissipate ignorance about otherness. Because they tolerate and promote curiosity about the foreign. Because they excite curiosity about what we are not. People often ask me, you spent most of your career in the art world, much of it in museums, and if there was ever a disaster, a fire, a terrorist attack, and you had to save one object, what would it be? Would it be the Mona Lisa? Would it be the Rembrandts or the Titians or the $120 million Jeff Koons sculpture? No, it would be these guys. These are lamassus. They are incredibly bizarre, towering, monumental, slightly odd hybrid sculptures created 5,000 years ago in ancient Assyria. They include elements of bulls, lions, winged eagles, lions, feet at the bottom, and humans. They stood at the gateways of temples and cities in ancient Assyria, an empire which stretched from present-day Western Egypt to Iran. They embodied the power of their rulers, such as Ashur-Nasirpal II, a notorious king which some of you may know from his portrait, which is just down the road here at the Fitzwilliam Museum. They straddled that very fascinating liminal zone between past and present, foreign and local, the here and there, animal, human, mythological, terrestrial. And for me, if the art of art history and art itself is a story of tracing this common history, this common conversation through images such as this, and this is an exemplary place to start. So I would invite us to take a walk through history using this example. As I said, they were highly prevalent. They appeared first in coins and cylinder seals and clay tablets. They formed the basis of several subsequent art historical traditions, appearing in the art of not only Babylon and Assyria, but also in the arts of ancient Persia, Judea, and even early Christianity, where the bull, lion, eagle, and human formed the four corners of the tetramorph, meant to signal Christianity's spread throughout the world. By 1860, their value had spread to Western Europe, and with the birth of archaeology, they were excavated at massive rates, moved to the new museums opening in Berlin, London, Paris, and even New York. They were so popular, in fact, that we can find them in military insignia for the French and British armies in the early 20th century. And most recently, they served as the background for the induction ceremonies of the US Army in the First Gulf War. What is so sad today is that their reinterpretation, their use value, represents a very dire threat to our shared cultural heritage. As I stand here today, all but a few of the lamassus in existence in Syria and Iraq have been severely damaged, if not outright destroyed, at the hands of ISIS and Daesh. They follow thousands of objects looted from the Bamiyan Buddhas all the way to the Mosul Museum. The ongoing crisis in Syria and Iraq represents the most dire threat to our shared cultural heritage and the most significant loss of art historical material since the Second World War. The museums of the region are home to 7,000 years of shared cultural history. And while some, like the Baghdad Museum, have reopened, this represents just one success story in a sea of casualties. I beg you, if we care about our past, if we want to encourage a tolerance of difference and promote a curiosity about otherness, we must do a better job of protecting it. For only if we understand, value, and protect where we have come from, will we know where we are going. Thank you very much.